The sterile white walls of the Seoul National University Hospital seemed to amplify the silence, a silence that gnawed at Kim Soo-hyun's soul. He sat beside his son's bed, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor a cold counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of his own worry. Min-jun, all of 5 years old, lay pale and still, his small chest rising and falling shallowly beneath the thin hospital blanket. The doctors called it a rare form of autoimmune disorder, one that baffled even the most renowned specialists in the country. They spoke of probabilities and possibilities, of treatments that might work and ones that certainly wouldn't, but offered little in the way of genuine hope. Soo-hyun, a man accustomed to control, to bending the world to his will through sheer force of intellect and determination, felt utterly helpless. He was a titan in the world of technology, a self-made billionaire whose name was synonymous with innovation. Yet, all his wealth and influence could not buy his son a single moment of relief. He had tried everything. Consultations with experts from across the globe, experimental treatments, even venturing into the realm of alternative medicine, clutching at any straw that promised a glimmer of improvement. Nothing had worked. Min-jun remained trapped in a fragile state, his life hanging precariously in the balance. Desperation, a cold and unwelcome companion, began to settle in his bones. He knew he was grasping at straws, but he couldn't afford to leave any stone unturned. That's when he made the offer. He had placed an advertisement in several prominent newspapers and online forums, a plea shrouded in anonymity, seeking a nanny with a miracle to offer. He hadn't specified the illness, only the desperation. Hundreds had responded, many with dubious credentials and even more dubious intentions. He had dismissed them all, their words sounding hollow and insincere. Then, she arrived. Her name was Park Sun-hee. She wasn't young, perhaps in her late 50s, with kind eyes etched with the wisdom of a life well lived. She wore simple, unadorned clothing and carried a worn leather bag that looked as if it had seen better days. Unlike the others who had come seeking fortune, she didn't exude an air of entitlement or greed. Instead, there was a quiet dignity about her, a sense of groundedness that somehow cut through the suffocating atmosphere of the hospital room. "Mr. Kim?" she asked softly, her voice gentle and calming. He nodded, his gaze fixed on his son. "You saw the advertisement?" "Yes," she replied. "I did." She paused, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the expensive medical equipment and the palpable air of despair. "You are offering a significant sum." Soo-hyun sighed. $7 million, he confirmed, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. If someone can cure my son." Sun-hee remained silent for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, she turned to him, her eyes meeting his with unwavering sincerity. "I cannot promise a cure, Mr. Kim. Such things are not within my power." His hope, which had flickered briefly to life, threatened to extinguish itself. "Then, why are you here?" "Because," she said, her voice firm, "I believe I can help." He scoffed, a bitter sound that echoed in the sterile room. "Everyone believes they can help. Doctors, specialists, they all believed. And yet, here we are." "I am not a doctor, Mr. Kim," she said patiently. "And I do not practice medicine. I work with energy. With the life force that flows through all living things." Soo-hyun stared at her, his mind struggling to reconcile her words with the stark reality of his son's condition. He was a man of science, of logic, of tangible proof. What she was suggesting seemed absurd. You're talking about, what?" "Spiritual healing?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Sun-hee smiled gently. "You may call it what you wish. But I have seen it work. I have helped others who were deemed hopeless. I offer no guarantees, but I offer my skills, my dedication, and my heart." He hesitated. He had nothing to lose. He had already exhausted every conventional option. The doctors were talking about palliative care, about making Min-jun comfortable in his final days. The thought was unbearable. What would you do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sun-hee approached the bed, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't touch Min-jun, but stood beside him, her eyes closed, her head bowed. A moment passed, then another, the silence in the room deepening, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Finally, she opened her eyes. "He is weak," she said softly. "Very weak. But there is still a spark. A flicker of life. It needs to be nurtured." She turned to Soo-hyun. "I would need to stay here, in the hospital. I would need a quiet space where I can work. And I would need your trust, Mr. Kim. Without that, nothing is possible." He looked at his son, at the fragile life that hung by a thread. He looked at Sun-hee, at the quiet strength in her eyes. He didn't believe in miracles, not really. But he believed in hope. And right now, hope was all he had left. "You have my trust," he said, the words heavy with the weight of his desperation. "Do whatever you need to do." Sun-hee nodded, a small smile gracing her lips. "Then let us begin." And so, it began. A strange and improbable journey, one that would challenge Soo-hyun's beliefs, test his patience, and ultimately, surprise everyone. The hospital staff whispered, the doctors scoffed, and Soo-hyun's advisors pleaded with him to reconsider, to cut his losses and accept the inevitable. But he remained steadfast, his eyes fixed on his son, his heart clinging to the fragile thread of hope that Sun-hee had offered. He had offered $7 million for a miracle. What he didn't know was that the miracle wouldn't come in the way he expected. The first few days were uneventful, at least to the casual observer. Sun-hee spent hours in Min-jun's room, sitting quietly beside his bed, sometimes chanting softly, sometimes simply holding his hand. She didn't use any machines, didn't administer any drugs. She simply was there. The nurses, initially curious and then increasingly skeptical, kept a close watch on her. They saw no change in Min-jun's condition. His vital signs remained stubbornly unchanged, his breathing shallow and labored. They reported their observations to the doctors, who shook their heads and murmured about the desperation of grieving parents. Soo-hyun, however, saw something different. He saw a subtle shift in Min-jun's demeanor. The boy seemed calmer, less agitated. He still slept most of the time, but when he was awake, his eyes seemed to focus more, to register his surroundings in a way they hadn't before. One afternoon, as Sun-hee was humming a low, melodic tune, Min-jun's tiny hand twitched. Soo-hyun, who had been sitting vigilantly by the bed, saw it and gasped. He grabbed Sun-hee's arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Did you see his hand move?" Sun-hee smiled gently. "Yes, I saw it," she said calmly. "It is a good sign." The doctors, when informed, were dismissive. "Involuntary muscle spasms," they said. "Common in patients in his condition." Soo-hyun wanted to argue, to shout, to force them to acknowledge what he had seen. But he held his tongue. He knew they wouldn't understand. They couldn't see what he saw. They couldn't feel the subtle shift in the energy in the room, the almost imperceptible lightening of the atmosphere. As the days turned into weeks, the changes became more pronounced. Min-jun started to stay awake for longer periods. He began to make small, gurgling sounds. He even managed a weak smile when Sun-hee sang to him. The nurses, initially skeptical, started to become cautiously optimistic. They couldn't deny the evidence of their own eyes. Min-jun was getting better. Slowly, painstakingly, but undeniably better. The doctors, however, remained unconvinced. They ran more tests, consulted with specialists, and pored over the results. They found no medical explanation for Min-jun's improvement. His condition, according to their charts and graphs, should have been deteriorating, not improving. "It's a remission," one of them suggested. "A spontaneous remission. It happens sometimes." Soo-hyun didn't care what they called it. He didn't care about their explanations or their theories. All he cared about was that his son was getting better. One day, Min-jun opened his eyes and looked directly at Soo-hyun. He didn't just focus, he saw him. He recognized him. A tiny smile spread across his face, and he reached out his hand. "Papa," he whispered, his voice weak but clear. Soo-hyun's heart soared. He grabbed his son's hand and held it tightly, tears streaming down his face. "I'm here, Minjun," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Papa's here." That was the turning point. From that moment on, Minjun's recovery accelerated. He started to eat small amounts of food. He started to sit up in bed. He even started to play with his toys. The hospital staff was astounded. They had never seen anything like it. They whispered about miracles, about the power of faith, about the unexplainable mysteries of the human body. The doctors, still baffled, continued to run tests, searching for a scientific explanation for Minjun's recovery. But they found nothing. Soo-hyun didn't care. He knew what had happened. He knew that Sun-hee had saved his son. He didn't understand how she had done it, but he knew that she had somehow tapped into a source of healing energy that the doctors couldn't see, couldn't measure, couldn't understand. One morning, Sun-hee came to Soo-hyun. "My work here is done," she said, her voice calm and serene. Soo-hyun looked at her, his heart filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my son's life." Sun-hee smiled. "I did what I could," she said. "The rest was up to him." Soo-hyun reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "It's for $7 million, as we agreed." Sun-hee looked at the check, then back at Soo-hyun. She shook her head. "I cannot accept this," she said. Soo-hyun was taken aback. "But, we had a deal," he said. "I offered you $7 million if you could cure my son." "I did not cure your son, Mr. Kim," Sun-hee said gently. "I merely helped him to heal himself. And besides," she added with a twinkle in her eye, "some things are more valuable than money." "But, what will you do?" Soo-hyun asked, confused. "I will continue to help others," Sun-hee said. "Those who are in need. Those who have lost hope." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Remember, Mr. Kim," she said, "the greatest healing comes from within." And with that, she was gone. Vanished as quietly and mysteriously as she had arrived. Soo-hyun stood there for a moment, staring at the empty doorway, the uncashed check still clutched in his hand. He didn't understand everything that had happened, but he knew that he had witnessed something extraordinary. Something that had changed him forever. He turned back to his son, who was sitting up in bed, playing with a toy car. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached all the way to his eyes. He walked over to Minjun and knelt beside him. "Hey, buddy," he said. "What are you playing?" Minjun looked up at him, his eyes bright and full of life. "Cars, Papa," he said. "Want to play?" Soo-hyun smiled again. "I'd love to," he said. And as he sat there, playing with his son, he realized that he had received something far more valuable than a cure. He had received a miracle. And he had learned that sometimes, the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, the most valuable things in life cannot be bought with money. The weight of the uncashed check felt heavy in Soo-hyun's hand, a physical manifestation of his confusion and burgeoning understanding. He carefully placed it on the bedside table, a stark white rectangle against the vibrant colors of Minjun's toys. He couldn't bring himself to discard it, not yet. It was a reminder of his desperation, his willingness to throw money at a problem that defied logic, and ultimately, of Sun-hee's quiet dignity and unexpected refusal. He spent the next few days observing Minjun, a silent guardian watching over his son's miraculous recovery. The boy continued to improve, regaining strength and energy with each passing day. He started asking for his favorite foods, demanding stories, and even attempting to run around the room, much to the nurse's gentle dismay. Soo-hyun found himself laughing more, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The doctors, still scratching their heads, eventually discharged Minjun. They remained cautiously optimistic, emphasizing the need for continued monitoring and a healthy lifestyle. Soo-hyun agreed, internally vowing to dedicate himself to his son's well-being. Back home, the mansion felt different. It was no longer a sterile environment of fear and anxiety, but a place filled with the sounds of laughter and play. Soo-hyun rearranged his schedule,
prioritizing time with Min-jun.
He read him bedtime stories, helped him build elaborate Lego castles, and even attempted to teach him how to play baseball in the garden, resulting in more missed catches than successful ones. One evening, as Min-jun was drifting off to sleep, he looked up at Soo-hyun with wide, innocent eyes.
"Papa," he whispered, the nice lady, she helped me. She made the bad feelings go away." Soo-hyun's heart skipped a beat.
He had deliberately avoided discussing Sun-hee with Min-jun, wanting to protect him from any potential confusion or emotional distress. "Yes, she did, sweetheart," he replied softly, stroking his son's hair.
"She was very kind.
She told me to be strong," Min-jun continued, his voice barely audible.
"And to always remember that I am loved." Tears welled up in Soo-hyun's eyes. He hadn't realized the extent of Sun-hee's influence on his son.
She had not only healed his body but had also touched his spirit, leaving behind a message of hope and resilience. In the weeks that followed, Soo-hyun found himself reflecting on Sun-hee's words, "The greatest healing comes from within." He began to examine his own life, his priorities, and his values. He had always been driven by ambition, by the pursuit of success and wealth. He had believed that money could solve any problem, that it could buy happiness and security. But Sun-hee had shown him that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in the love and connection he shared with his son. He started making changes. He delegated more responsibility at his company, allowing himself more time for personal pursuits. He reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had been neglected in his relentless pursuit of success. He even started volunteering at a local children's hospital, wanting to give back to the community and to offer hope to other families facing similar challenges. One day, while sorting through some old papers, Soo-hyun stumbled upon a file containing information about rare autoimmune disorders. He began to research Min-jun's condition, determined to understand the science behind his illness and to contribute to finding a cure. He contacted leading researchers in the field, offering his financial support and his expertise in technology. He realized that he could use his resources and his influence to make a real difference in the world, to help others who were suffering from debilitating diseases. He could honor Sun-hee's legacy by dedicating himself to a cause greater than himself. Months turned into years. Min-jun continued to thrive, growing into a healthy and happy young boy. He excelled in school, made friends easily, and developed a passion for music. Soo-hyun watched him with pride, grateful for every moment they shared. He never saw Sun-hee again, but he often thought about her, wondering where she was and what she was doing. He knew that she was out there, somewhere, continuing to help others, spreading her message of hope and healing. One afternoon, while attending a fundraising gala for the children's hospital, Soo-hyun was approached by a woman he had never met before. She was petite and unassuming, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Mr. Kim," she said, extending her hand. "My name is Lee Woo-young. I work with a small organization that provides alternative healing therapies to children with chronic illnesses." Soo-hyun shook her hand, intrigued. "Alternative healing therapies?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "We believe that healing is not just about treating the body, but also about nurturing the mind and the spirit. We use techniques such as meditation, yoga, and energy healing to help children cope with their illnesses and to promote their overall well-being." Soo-hyun listened intently, his mind racing. He couldn't help but wonder if this woman knew Sun-hee, if she was part of the same network of healers. "We recently received a very generous donation from an anonymous benefactor," Lee Woo-young continued. "It has allowed us to expand our services and to reach more children in need." Soo-hyun's heart skipped a beat. He knew, without a doubt, that the anonymous benefactor was Sun-hee. She had used the money he had offered her to continue her work, to help even more children find healing and hope. "Mr. Kim," Lee Woo-young said, breaking through his thoughts. "I understand that you have a personal connection to this type of healing. Your son, Min-jun, was treated by a woman named Park Sun-hee several years ago, is that correct?" Soo-hyun nodded, his eyes widening in surprise. "Yes," he said. "How did you know?" Lee Woo-young smiled. "Sun-hee is a legend in our community," she said. "She has a gift for healing that is truly remarkable. She has helped countless children over the years, and she has inspired many of us to follow in her footsteps.
Soo-hyun felt a surge of emotion.
He had never fully understood the extent of Sun-hee's influence, the impact she had had on the lives of so many people. "I haven't seen her in years," he said. "I don't even know where she is."
"She travels a lot," Lee Woo-young replied. "She goes wherever she is needed most.
But I know that she is always watching over us, guiding us, and inspiring us to do our best."
Soo-hyun smiled, a sense of peace washing over him.
He knew that Sun-hee was out there, continuing to make a difference in the world. And he knew that he, too, could contribute to her legacy by supporting her work and by continuing to spread her message of hope and healing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his checkbook. "Ms. Lee," he said, "I would like to make a donation to your organization.
I want to help you continue your important work." Lee Woo-young's eyes lit up.
"That would be wonderful, Mr. Kim," she said.
"Thank you so much."
As Soo-hyun wrote the check, he thought about Sun-hee, about her kindness, her compassion, and her unwavering belief in the power of healing. He knew that he would never forget her, that she would always be a part of his life. He handed the check to Lee Woo-young, a feeling of gratitude and purpose filling his heart. He had learned that the greatest healing comes from within, and that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought with money. He had learned that true wealth lies in the love and connection we share with others, and in the willingness to give back to the world. And he had learned that sometimes, the most unexpected people can change our lives forever.
"It's not just about the money, Ms. Lee," Soo-hyun said, handing her the check.
"It's about supporting the kind of care that truly sees the child, the person, not just the illness." Lee Woo-young looked at the generous amount, her eyes welling up.
"We will make sure it goes where it's needed most, Mr. Kim. And I promise to let Sun-hee know of your continued generosity, should I have the chance."
The gala continued, but Soo-hyun found himself lost in thought. He excused himself, needing some air. Stepping onto the balcony, overlooking the glittering city, he pulled out his phone. He hadn't thought about her in this way for a long time, not since Min-jun had fully recovered. But now, the desire to know, to thank her properly, burned within him. He started searching, a task he should have undertaken years ago. Park Sun-hee, healer. The internet was a vast ocean of information, and most of it led to dead ends, generic articles about alternative medicine, a few obscure blog posts mentioning a gifted healer in passing. He refined his search, adding keywords like spiritual healing, childhood illness, even miracle cures.
Nothing concrete.
Days turned into weeks, his search becoming an obsession. He tasked his assistants, his vast network of contacts, with finding any trace of Park Sun-hee. He knew it was a long shot, a needle in a haystack. But he couldn't shake the feeling that she was out there, continuing her work, and he needed to find her. One evening, while working late in his office, his head buried in research, his phone rang. It was his head of security, Mr. Choi. "Mr. Kim," Mr. Choi's voice was unusually tense.
"We might have something.
One of our contacts in the rural provinces has reported a woman matching Sun-hee's description. She's been working with a small community dealing with unusual circumstances."
Soo-hyun's heart leaped. "Unusual circumstances? What do you mean?"
"There's been an outbreak of a strange illness affecting the children in a remote village. The local doctors are baffled. This woman, Park Sun-hee, arrived a few weeks ago and has been assisting."
Soo-hyun didn't hesitate.
"Prepare the helicopter. We're leaving immediately." The journey was long and arduous. They flew as far as they could, then switched to a jeep, bumping along treacherous mountain roads. The air grew thinner, the landscape wilder. Finally, they reached the village, a cluster of humble houses nestled in a valley, surrounded by towering peaks. The scene was one of quiet desperation. Children coughed, their faces pale and drawn. Their parents looked on, their eyes filled with worry. A small group of medical personnel, clearly overwhelmed, moved amongst them. Soo-hyun scanned the crowd, his heart pounding. And then he saw her. She was sitting beside a young girl, her hand resting gently on her forehead. Her eyes were closed, her face serene. Even from a distance, he could feel the energy radiating from her, a palpable sense of calm and healing. She looked older, her hair streaked with gray, but her eyes still held that same spark of kindness and wisdom. He approached slowly, hesitant to interrupt. As he drew closer, Sun-hee opened her eyes and looked up. For a moment, she didn't seem to recognize him. Then, a flicker of recognition crossed her face, followed by a warm, gentle smile. "Soo-hyun," she said softly, her voice the same as he remembered.
"It's been a long time."
He knelt beside her, overwhelmed by emotion. "Sun-hee," he replied, his voice thick with gratitude.
I don't know how to thank you."
"For Min-jun, for everything." She shook her head.
"There's no need for thanks. Min-jun was strong. He had the will to heal."
"But you helped him," Soo-hyun insisted.
"You gave us hope when we had none.
And now, I hear you're helping these children too."
Sun-hee sighed, her gaze sweeping over the sick children. "This is different. This illness, it's not just physical. There's something else at play here, something darker."
"Darker?"
Soo-hyun asked, concerned. "What do you mean?"
"There's a deep-seated fear in this village, a sense of unease that's been passed down through generations.
It's manifesting as this illness, weakening their bodies and their spirits." Soo-hyun frowned.
He was a man of science, of logic. He struggled to understand what she was saying. "So, how do you fight that? How do you fight fear?" "With love," Sun-hee replied simply.
"With compassion.
By helping them to reconnect with their own inner strength." She turned back to the young girl, her hand still resting on her forehead. She closed her eyes again, and Soo-hyun could see her lips moving silently in prayer. He watched her, mesmerized, as she worked. He saw the way she interacted with the children, the way she listened to their fears, the way she offered them comfort and reassurance. He realized that her healing wasn't just about the physical body, it was about nurturing their souls, about reminding them of their own inherent worth. He spent the next few days in the village, observing Sun-hee and learning from her. He helped where he could, assisting the medical personnel, bringing supplies, and offering support to the families. He saw firsthand the impact she was having, not just on the children, but on the entire community. He also learned more about the darker forces Sun-hee had mentioned. The village had a long history of isolation and superstition. They believed in ancient spirits and curses, and their fear had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Sun-hee was working to break that cycle of fear, to help them embrace hope and healing. She was teaching them meditation, leading them in communal prayers, and encouraging them to connect with nature. One evening, as they sat by a fire, Sun-hee turned to Soo-hyun. "You see, Soo-hyun," she said, "money can buy medicine, it can buy technology, but it can't buy peace of mind.
It can't buy faith. Those things come from within."
Soo-hyun nodded, humbled. He had spent his life chasing success, accumulating wealth, believing that these things would bring him happiness. But he had learned that true happiness came from something much deeper, something much more meaningful.
"I understand now," he said. "I understand what you're doing here. And I want to help, in any way I can." Sun-hee smiled. "You already are," she said. "Your presence here, your willingness to learn, your support for these people, it all makes a difference." Together, they worked to bring healing and hope to the village. Soo-hyun used his resources to provide better medical care, to improve the living conditions, and to educate the children. He also helped to promote the village's unique cultural heritage, showcasing their art, their music, and their traditions to the outside world. Slowly but surely, the village began to heal. The children's health improved, their spirits lifted, and the community rediscovered its sense of hope and resilience. The fear that had haunted them for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of unity and strength. As the village healed, Soo-hyun also found himself healing. He realized that his obsession with wealth and success had left him empty and unfulfilled. He had neglected his relationships, his passions, and his own well-being. He decided to make a change. He started spending more time with Min-jun, rediscovering the joy of fatherhood. He invested in projects that were meaningful to him, supporting causes that he believed in. And he made a conscious effort to connect with people on a deeper level,
to build genuine relationships based on trust and respect. Before leaving the village, Soo-hyun stood with Sun-hee on a hilltop, overlooking the valley below. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape. "Thank you, Sun-hee," he said, his voice filled with emotion.
"You've taught me so much.
You've shown me what's truly important in life."
Sun-hee smiled.
"You had it in you all along, Soo-hyun," she said.
"You just needed a little reminder."
He knew that he would never forget his time in the village, or the lessons he had learned from Sun-hee. He knew that he would carry her message of hope and healing with him, wherever he went. He returned to Seoul a changed man. He still ran his company, but he did so with a new sense of purpose. He used his wealth and influence to make a positive impact on the world, supporting initiatives that promoted education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability. He also made sure to stay in touch with the village, providing ongoing support and encouragement. He watched with pride as the community thrived, becoming a beacon of hope and resilience in a world that often seemed dark and despairing. Years later, Min-jun, now a young man, came to him with a request. "Dad," he said, "I want to meet Sun-hee. I want to thank her, in person, for what she did for me."
Soo-hyun smiled. He knew that this day would come.
He had told Min-jun about Sun-hee countless times, sharing stories of her kindness, her wisdom, and her unwavering belief in the power of healing.
Together, they set out to find her. It wasn't easy. She was always on the move, traveling to wherever she was needed most.
But they persevered, following leads, making connections, and never giving up hope. Finally, they found her in a remote mountain village in Nepal, working with a group of children who had been orphaned by an earthquake.
The reunion was emotional. Min-jun embraced Sun-hee, tears streaming down his face.
He thanked her for saving his life, for giving him a second chance. Sun-hee smiled, her eyes twinkling. "You saved yourself, Min-jun," she said.
"I just helped you remember how."
As they stood together, watching the children play, Soo-hyun felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. He had come full circle. He had started his journey desperate and lost, searching for a cure for his son.